Hey there, welcome to episode 98 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this on Friday, January 10, 2025. Time is approximately 11:49 a.m. Some seconds have passed, that's why it's approximately. The CES week comes to an end today here in Vegas. I have not yet been to the show today. I was there for 3 days previously. A lot of talking, in case you can't tell. The topic for today's show, second stories. There are two meanings, ironically. Second stories on this, episode 98 of the 10th of January. I messed those up. For this episode 98 on the 10th of January. Hopefully, oh, by the way, if you're not familiar with Cafe Genius, it is, the name is based on Cafe Centro in San Francisco, formerly. Very unfortunately, they shut down, I want to say about a year and a half ago. Cafe Centro, where startups start. It famously is where Twitter got its start, among others. So it was located in South Park, very near the AT&T ballpark. So I had been there several times. Very nice. The Greater Vegas area needs a Cafe Centro. And they spelled cafe with two F's, as everyone should. Genius from the Genius lunches we used to have in the downtown project days. It was just a gathering of people, chit-chat about what's going on, who's working on what's cool going on, what's not cool going on, etc., etc. And then for the show, because Cafe Genius is a thing, Cafe Genius Impresarios, the impresarios are the people doing stuff. You can say they're people who are impressing, but that's on you. Impresarios. Cafe with two F's, impresarios with two S's. Those are both correct spellings, just not common. Cafe Genius Impresario is a show about our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem here in the Greater Vegas area and maybe beyond. And ideally, since we did start off in the early days with interviews, but I have a lot to say, and booking people in Greater Vegas is a challenge sometimes. They have their things going on. Getting an entrepreneur to sit down is a challenge in itself, if you can find one. So these have been mostly monologues about some ideas and observations and so on, as will today's episode be. But hopefully we'll get some dialogue happening this year. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which will contain the show notes that I will read the summary of, and a couple of links. There are the two shameless self-promotion links as usual, and two links that have to do with the second meaning of second stories. So let's get on with the show. Again, a brief show today. I'm going to head down to the final day, visit Eureka Park one last time, where the startups are. Much like Cafe Centro, it's where the startups, they don't necessarily start at Eureka Park, but some are student research projects from universities and so on. But it's certainly where the founders and the cool people are, not the glitz and glamour and the show on the main floors. So let's get to it. The summary is as follows. A less intricate episode today as CES 2025 comes to an end, and the Greater Vegas area enjoys visits until they depart from innovators and instigators in the consumer electronics and, more perhaps, of late, artificial intelligence spaces. Artificial intelligence isn't really consumer electronics, maybe not yet, but who knows. Among many, many other spaces. It was difficult to find Vegas innovation on the show floors. We should wonder why. Where is the Vegas? We're going to be the next Silicon Valley. That's what I've been hearing. So where is everyone? The links for today's episode include the two shameless self-promotion links, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo and Ko-fi.com/DanHugo. That's ko-fi.com/DanHugo. You can listen to the Buy Me an Update micro episode on Monday mornings, posted exclusively on buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo in the posts section. It's not required listening. And by the way, you're not really compelled in any way to spend any money on either of these sites, but the option is there if you like. Ko-fi.com will be more little micro text updates. So we're playing with these toys. These two platforms, they're not really toys. The two platforms are used frequently by open source developers, content creators, and so on. So it's engagement tools that I've had around for quite a while. I'm continuing to use them and experiment with them and so on. On buymeacoffee.com, you'll find links to all of my audio programs, my GitHub projects, my favorite coffee beans, and so on. It's a big page, a free-form link tree if you like. So visit one or the other. And don't forget, Monday mornings, buy me an update, an audio post on buymeacoffee.com. Who Destroyed 3 Mile Island? An excellent presentation. He's done this several times in different venues by Nicholas Means, a great storyteller. He likes telling stories about engineering or failures or both. And so this, I don't know if this is exactly the one, but his 3 Mile Island presentation was the first one I had heard from Nicholas Means. This was when he was still at GitHub, I think. He's moved around a bit. Very creative individual, very interesting, and really good at presenting what should be, in this case, considered a complicated story. It's where I first heard the term second story, which you can watch the video and learn for yourself in that context. But essentially, the second story, which is described in our next link, Second Stories, on heysue.com. It's a blog entry, the importance of second stories. It's the what is more important than the who, and why the second story is usually more important, because it's systemic issues, not a finger pointing at a person. So Nicholas Means presents the infrastructure challenges, the training lapses, the user experience, if you will, in the control room that led to information being presented poorly and late, not in real time, and a number of other. It's really just a fascinating talk. And now that 3 Mile Island will be powered back up for the sake of artificial intelligence, we get a little bit of convergence with the hype curve of artificial intelligence. Maybe AI will run the reactor. That will be funny when it decides that we are getting in its way. So the Second Stories article, you can just flip through there and get a rundown. But if you look for second story by itself, you will usually find the common American English expression for the second story of a home or a building. You know, the third story, the fourth story. So the second story is the one above the first story, which is usually the ground floor. So in our case, we're going to consider the what over the who. But first, we're going to consider the second story in our building, if you like, of our startup scene. And I really don't like that term. I think it kind of oversimplifies. It's like community. It's like a lot of presumptions are hanging on those two words, startup scene. But people do use that commonly, communities. So you got to be fluent in this generalized or loaded language. Oh, yeah. So the first part of the episode will be the second floor, second story, or what we could just generally refer to as another startup scene. And it doesn't have to be just two, but I will say it cannot be just one. It has to be more than one. So at least two. Why would I say this? Because we can have more than one. Maybe we should. Well, relying too much on a single monolithic community, and I'm not saying it's monolithic either, but, arguably, relying on a single monolithic community will not enable full mobility. Rather, it leads to striation. If you're closer to the in crowd, or maybe, whichever end, top, left, whatever, if you're closer to where that is, then you will be invited more often to things. You'll be introduced more. Your name will be used more. You'll find yourself sitting at tables that you wouldn't have thought, like, why was I invited? Well, because you're in. We know your first name. You are referred to by your first name. I've found this to be true of in a few circumstances. There's such familiarity with the in crowd that people will simply say the first name, and you are expected to know who that is. Even if there are more people with the first name, there's the one with the first name. And I'm reminded of the story from Downtown Vegas days, Downtown Project in downtown Vegas. I cannot remember the person's name. It was a woman, and she said to me one evening, and I knew all the three people that she was going to refer to. She said, "Oh, there are three Dylans." Dylan Bathurst, Dylan Simpson, and Dylan Jorgensen. I almost forgot he's a YouTuber now. So there's three. And I said, "There's only three?" Yeah, those are those are the three that matter. That kind of, it wasn't exactly that, but it was this notion that there are, the cool kids are in a club and they are known by their, either their first name or maybe, Muffy and I don't know, pick another goofy, preppy name. So I think that's a problem. It's my opinion. Wait, no, it's not just my opinion. There are, we've already seen this in Vegas so many times, it's painful that there are these cliques, if you like. There are the in crowd, like I said. There's this notion that we're going to do the next Silicon Valley, which I've mentioned many times, and which you've probably read, all this glowing reflection upon our prowess in the tech scene and so on. It's just not quite as true as people would like it to believe, and I'm kind of wondering if there's in social psych, that's is it brain protection, or there's a bunch of different words for it, but essentially it's groupthink. It's a form of groupthink where you're like, if we just talk to ourselves and someone says, "Hey, we're going to be the next Silicon Valley," everybody else says, "Yeah." And then no one from outside of that little group is saying or is heard to say things like, "We don't have those things. We don't have the facilities. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the culture of innovation," and so on. Unless they listen to this audio program over several episodes, and then they might get the sense that I think somebody thinks that we're not going to be the next Silicon Valley. Interesting. So it's not just me saying this, though, so I don't feel so bad. I don't feel like I'm the lone voice. In fact, while I was at CES, this came up a few times. I thought there was, last year, there was a UNLV booth, at least, in Eureka Park. I didn't see the Vegas presence out on the show floor. And I will tell you this. If the GOED doesn't have a booth for next year, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, by the way, if you're not familiar, if the GOED doesn't have a booth or a pavilion or however you want, like a multi-booth or a multi-podium, booth setup, so that everybody doing something innovative, not everybody, but whoever's willing and has something to demonstrate, can have a presence there. There should be a Nevada or Southern Nevada presence on the show floor at Eureka Park to demonstrate. See, if you're going to be on the main show floor, you're lost in the glitz and glamour. You got to have shiny lights. You got to hire 25 people to work in your booth. In Eureka Park, you're talking to founders. You're talking to chief scientists, to CEOs, to actual employees, the people that want and care about what they're doing. Right? They want this to succeed and so on. They're often sponsored to have a podium or a little table or a fractional booth. A very strong presence from Korea. There's always a strong presence from France, Italy, Israel, the Netherlands. I think there was a Ukraine section, Africa. Where else? Turkey, of course. Where else? There were countries or regions. And then there were focal areas like automotive and smart home and things like this. So depending on I'm going to guess your resources, you'll either be in a section or in a regional, so a topical section or a regional section. Either way, I have to say this: the lack of a Nevada presence was noticed. Why? Hey, why is there? And again, UNLV was here last year. I don't even see them. And I said, yeah, well, all the innovation is top secret. And then as well, we were talking, I've spoken to a few people. And by the way, someone did notice there's so many people with Vegas startups here. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, like a ton of people with Vegas badges. And I said, oh, no, we just come here for free. We live here. We can come to the show and see what's going on. So I said, I've been coming here for free for 14 years. I didn't mean to rain on the parade, but the fact is that people wandering around with a Nevada or Vegas, specifically Vegas, location are not necessarily in the so-called startup scene or tech scene or whatever you want to refer to this as. They're maybe just there to visit. I myself am in the industry, so I did say that too. But just because you have a Las Vegas on your badge doesn't mean you are entrepreneurial or innovative. You may just be a spectator. You may just be checking it out, which is totally fine. But it is something to be aware of, I suppose. But it's not just me saying this. When we were on the second floor, will this be a segue into the second story? The second floor of Venetian Expo, where maybe I would say a little bit more established, although there were still some regional booths there. China had a strong presence also on the second floor of Venetian Park, Shenzhen in particular. And then food tech and some other stuff. So second floor was really interesting as well. And I had a couple of conversations with people who were a little bit more familiar with our startup scene. And this is where I'm going to say once again that I am not the only one that's pointing this out, that the startup scene is a problem, because that's it. If that's all there is, it's worse than we thought. But there's nothing preventing anyone from having another startup scene where you don't refer to people by their first names that everybody knows and presume that, oh, those are the three people you need to talk to, and then you're all good, because that's not true. So understanding that we do not have a healthy startup scene. Oh, but look, we have these two things happening. They've been talking about this for years. The downtown project was about 10 years ago, 9 years ago, when it started, when it actually kind of came out onto the scene. It was it was around when I got here. So I always say about 2014. And so if you look at about 5 years of that to 2019, it was 2018, 2019. So maybe it's 2013. But anyway, 5 years, and then 5 years of refractory period of sorts. So just say it's been 10 years since the downtown project came onto the scene. There's a lot to learn from that. And there should be something to learn from that if we can actually capture it. And then we should reflect on the fact that the downtown project actually rolled out a lot of entrepreneurialism of different types and flavors and different types of people, different skill levels. There wasn't necessarily the resources in place to match the needs of some of the people with the resources that they had on hand, but also the skill sets. Not everyone was ready to start their own startup. They had the dream, but not necessarily the knowledge or the know-how, the savvy, if you like. And that's just a matter of having someone to ask questions of, right? What should I do about this, whatnot? And I was told contemporaneously there was just a lack of mentorship, a lack of guidance. It was a lot of dream, but not a lot of stuff available, not a lot of tools on the ground. And I used to call it the last mile problem. Just like package delivery, other infrastructure, getting to Las Vegas was not a problem. Come to Vegas, bring start your startup, come to the downtown project. But when you got here, like, okay, how do I get started? Oh, well, you're here. Good luck. And I'm not saying it was quite that bad, but from what I heard from people directly, it kind of felt like it was that bad. And for some people, it may have been that bad. So there was just not what they were hoping to receive. It's maybe it was a question of overpromising and delivering on the part of the maybe the downtown project proper, or some component of, who knows. So this is not a blame game today. This is about, nor is there blame. There's more to learn. There's not finger pointing, and this will be a nice dovetail also to the second story. So if people who had come here had that last mile accounted for, or the resources available for them to fill in that last mile, not necessarily holding hand and wiping their nose for them and so on, adults trying to be entrepreneurial, but some resources in place to make sure that they were set up to not fail. And we actually attempted about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to create the Startup Resource Center to tackle that exactly. And it would have, or it will, if something like this were to take place. The Startup Resource Center itself is sort of folded up the tent and went home onto other things. But if someone were to try to tackle that last mile, the idea was to learn from the people who went through the downtown project, what worked and what didn't, and then learn from that, because it was in the same exact physical footprint. It was in the same sort of cultural milieu, if you like. The ecosystem has changed, but not by much. Some of the same challenges, some of the same impressions about what Las Vegas is. Is it seen as a startup hub, an innovation hub, things like this? And I've been saying for 10 years, I think 11 years. Well, what was it? I moved in August of 2013. So yeah, I moved here. I've been saying it for nearly that entire time. So call it 10. The value proposition for Vegas in the innovation scene is the fact that we have today, I think it's a larger number, 155,000 hotel rooms, and we have resources and an airport and soon a Brightline train, and we have Destination City. Bring your family, come out and hang and work with your colleagues, working remotely perhaps in the modern era, working from home, and actually make remote work doable in a destination city with all the resources you need to accomplish that without having to build permanent infrastructure for companies to move and gentrify the area and all that goes with that. So relocating to Vegas to turn it into the next Silicon Valley is not an ideal plan, in my opinion. And again, I'm not alone in thinking that. So yeah, let's get to that second story now. So the what over the who. If we were to examine the downtown project, when I say this, I'm occasionally met with Tony Hsieh, and I'm like, I'm not. This is not about Tony Hsieh. Tony Hsieh had some interesting ideas, and he implemented them. So he tried, and that is entrepreneurial thinking. So right off the bat, entrepreneurialism is about failing and succeeding. So it's not a pointing the finger game. If there was blame to be had, it was by some of the people. I guess this sounds like I'm blaming Tony for this. Some of the people he hired to be around him who didn't get it or had their own agenda, or that's a longer story, but that's where some of that feedback might come in. But I've even said just right up front when I was putting together the retrospective, which may see the light of day someday, I still think it would be infinitely valuable. Don't even name names. It's not about the people. It is literally about the what worked and what didn't, not who worked, what worked. And that is the sort of the crux of the second story. So after you're done blaming and pointing fingers and the he said, she said, and she said, he said, and whatever else, you step back and you say, all right, what happened? Not who did what, but what happened? The other meaning, which I first heard in the Nicholas Means presentation about 3 Mile Island, which I linked to one of them that are available on YouTube. It's a reflection that comes later after fingers are pointed and blame is assigned to people. So that's the who. So the what, again, later when the dust settles, we examine the what, the systemic. I always use those interchangeably and they're not interchangeable. The systemic issues, the training failures, the lack of communication between humans, inconsistencies in information sharing perhaps. And by the way, Tony did roll out the holacracy management sort of process or infrastructure for the downtown project, and some people blame that. So not as the one thing, but the nature of holacracy is to enforce a flat management and sort of collaboration infrastructure, and you have circles. The circles work on projects. They communicate with tensions. I personally have read the holacracy book. I've had my own issues with the notion. I've never pursued it in practice, so I can't really comment on like the day-to-day, what works, what doesn't with holacracy. But I will say that may have been one of the whats, was choosing that type of management infrastructure, which is not at all traditional or familiar enough for people to say, oh, okay, I get it. It's really very a departure, or it can be, depending on how it's implemented. So the lack of communication and inconsistencies in information sharing may have arisen from that approach, maybe, not sure. And the list of possibilities goes on. Knowing the specifics, the whys of a failure are critical, lest we repeat the same failures with different characters to blame, and therefore you must know what happened, the whats, and then you get to the whys. Why did this happen? Well, what happened to cause this? And again, the 3 Mile Island presentation that Nick goes through, Nicholas Means, I don't even know if he goes by Nick, so sorry, Nicholas Means, really some interesting observations, and it's from a report that the Carter administration imposed on everyone after the fingers were pointed. And it's a fascinating analysis and why the second story is so important. Some very fixable problems that then went on to be fixed for the most part. The Challenger disaster and the Mars lander mission, where the lander crashed on the surface of Mars, it crashed due to units mismatch. Somebody was working with feet and inches, others in meters and kilograms. I guess feet and pounds versus meters and kilograms. How about that? So when you don't have the same units, but you look at the numbers and you say, okay, 2.2, is it pounds or kilograms? That matters. So the lander was traveling too quickly when it reached the surface, and like, are we 100 feet or 100 meters above? That's going to matter. I guess it's not funny, although that was just money. The Challenger disaster, obviously, loss of life. These were both the result of just fundamental whats. Nobody had bad intentions. It wasn't an evil plot. It was literally infrastructure, systemic, bad practices, things that must be learned and unlearned to avoid these problems. So the what matters. Why did it happen? Well, what exactly happened? What were the steps? What were the missing pieces? What were the pieces that should be missing, etc.? They revealed much more for both of those and more. There are many in the second stories. And so that's one of the reasons to have a retrospective about the downtown project. If there is going to be an entrepreneurial push, the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, if it is to improve or become more healthy or more vibrant, take your pick of terminology, realizing the second story of the downtown project is essential. For our entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem, it is important to know why. So that's like how we got here. That's the retrospective version of this. Why is it what it is? Or perhaps why it might not be what it could have been somewhere down the road. So we should look at the downtown project and the what's over the who's. Don't point fingers. What worked, what didn't, and why have we arrived where we are today, and are we in a good place or not? If there is only one startup scene, and by the way, the downtown project probably had, it was geographically the downtown project, but there was hospitality, there were tech startups, there were services, so there was a variety of efforts. I don't know the inner workings of those, and that would be a good retrospective focus, almost as if it is, and find out which parts of these did a little bit better or a little bit worse, and what was available to them, what sorts of communication, what sorts of skills, sharing, mentorship, etc. were happening. And what do we have now? What do we need? If there's only one startup scene, one collection of characters, one collection of people everybody knows by first name, and is Jamie going to be there? Which one? There are two Jamies? Oh my God. Well, I don't know if there's still two. There might be just one. And perhaps the notion that top-down is the way forward to enable and encourage entrepreneurialism and innovation, is it? And better, both together, innovation plus entrepreneurialism. Then we are placing the future in the hands of a few and relying far too much on that few. So if we rely on a few people, and if we presume a top-down sort of information flow, direction, guidance flow, right? Oh, just go to this set of people at the top of this pyramid, if you like. They'll introduce you to people they know. They'll do warm introductions, and you'll meet people that are kind of in the club. This is the startup scene. Go to this event. Go talk to that person. Here's what we have. Well, first of all, I don't think anybody knows exactly what they have here. They've done a horrible job with an asset map and just general outreach within the known siloed sort of terrain that we exist in here in the greater Vegas area. So you're either over there, you're over here. Different groups keep to themselves. It's not isolation necessarily, but the insulation, the insulated nature of us and them, like, we're doing our thing over here. And the ghosting culture, I guess, the tendency for people to just sort of disappear because it doesn't serve them to be responsive. I encounter that every single day. That is not how the innovation ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the combination, that is not how they flourish, by blowing people off. And that is the way Vegas functions. Our claim that we're an innovation hub will be tested more and more as winners are chosen by the top. Like, oh, we're going to have this thing. We're only going to invite those 3 or 4 people that we know are in. What about the 10 people who are never around because they're so busy working on their startups and they're subject matter experts? Yeah, we don't get along with them. They're not going to be invited. And this happens all the time. So the second story of the downtown project may or may not be the second story of the, I'm going to put my air quotes up. Are you ready? Startup scene in the greater Vegas area today. It's clearly not focused in the downtown project footprint, although some of it is there. Some of it will be in other parts of Clark County. Clark County is trying to drive the notion of an innovation hub between the Blackfire Tech Park property and the university, and there's the Switch, and there's some other stuff. So somewhere along the 215 on the south part of the area. So it's not in the city of Las Vegas. It's in Clark County, Enterprise, Paradise, somewhere in there. And they really want to establish yet another innovation district of sorts, because the one we have is so underutilized that we need another one. And unfortunately, they are focusing, and so this will be subject matter for the second story. They're focusing on, from the report I read, restaurants, bars, co-work spaces, places where people can meet, share ideas. We have those. We have all those things, by the way. If you look at innovation hub developments in other places, they're building biomedical laboratory spaces. They're building technology development spaces. They're developing purpose-built facilities and infrastructure, taking aim at a variety of different types of technology if you want to develop technology. Now, the greater Vegas area offers a wide array of innovation possibilities that are not necessarily focused on technology. First of all, we're never going to be Silicon Valley in the sense that we're not going to make chips here. Those require a ton of water. So, Phoenix, Tempe, Chandler area in Arizona, even Utah has one chip fab from Samsung. They are closer in both places to being a Silicon Valley. They have innovation, they have resources, they have actual chip production, chip fabrication, so they have actual direct hands-on technology development. TSMC is building a chip fab in the Chandler area, I believe, Tempe or Chandler. So these are places that are actually, if you want to use the term Silicon Valley, they're much closer as far as the infrastructure and the forward-looking plans in this area. Silicon Valley in Phoenix has been, semiconductors were one of their 3 pillars of their economy for 20 years now, more. Intel, Motorola, other companies have been fabricating silicon in the Phoenix area, Tempe, Chandler, for decades. So they are much closer to being the next Silicon Valley. But there's this notion that Silicon Valley is the moniker for a place of innovation. But we can offer food innovation. We can offer entertainment innovation. That's what Blackfire is about, gaming and hospitality innovation, right? We can offer water and sustainability innovation, which is already happening here as well. We can allegedly start to think about biomedical innovation when the medical school and any research facilities open at the university. In fact, university driving innovation facility development, so some university scale infrastructure, and leaning into our innovation destination possibilities. Come to Vegas, bring your workforce together into our city, enjoy all that we have to offer. You can timeshare some engineering spaces or some biomedical spaces as needed, and then return back to where you are. Have an innovation sprint for the week or 2 weeks. So bring your team together so that you can interact in person. No better place to do it than here in Vegas, and then return to your remote workplaces and distributed offices and so on. So those are possibilities that match much more closely with this notion of being the next Silicon Valley. We can be a completely capable innovation destination with enough resources in place not to gentrify, not to demand that people relocate to the city and kill off the fun economy. Don't even say that. Trademark pending. But to actually enable a destination where technology can happen. And then, by the way, there's 40 million people here to engage with, 40 million people every year visiting, to engage with new products. And you can see that in the smart or unmanned? Driverless. I think driverless vehicle is the new word. So driverless vehicles, electric driverless vehicles, perhaps. When Nevada became one of the FAA test sites about 10 years ago, it was one of 6 places where you could test drones. So unmanned aerial vehicles, whatever they're called now, unpersoned. So that sort of set the stage. Now we can have driverless vehicles or assisted driverless vehicles, if you like. There's different versions that they're trying out. You can actually try those out in the marketplace. And when you have 40 million people passing through Vegas every year for different parts of the fun economy, you have opportunities to engage with people from all parts of our society, cultures, regions, etc. Some people might come here to try those things, but in other cases, they didn't even know they were here. Oh, what is this? There's nobody driving the car. Get in, give it a try. So the opportunities here are different if you follow the traditional playbook of, spend a bunch of money, invite people that make much more money than the people here, just come to the area and gentrify our city too. We will have a replay of Austin, perhaps. We're not going to be the next Silicon Valley. The 100 years of culture of innovation that's been developing organically in the Silicon Valley region didn't happen here. So you can say, well, we can just sprinkle money on top of the city. That's not going to work. So the second story of the downtown project may or may not be a harbinger for what is unfolding now. I'm going to suggest that there will be some things that worked that will apply to this current drive to create the next innovation hub and whatever. I'm going to say that some of the stuff that worked will be useful. Some of the stuff that did not work is useful also, but I have a feeling we're going to start seeing the things that don't work here be different. Can't we just sprinkle capital on top? Now, Vegas Tech Fund did sprinkle capital, but they sprinkled capital here locally. They tried to. Later, their investments were remote. The hospitality investments were local, right? So you had local money flowing to local people. Not always locally sourced money, but at least the oversight, there was some engagement here and so on. That last mile, though, was about mentorship and other resources. So the funding was here to some degree. So the finer points would come out in the retrospective about exact who gave money to whom and how and under what circumstance and so on. But the take home is you had a vested interest in the locality, the return on community notion, the downtown project programs that they did have in place to the extent that they were helpful. So the downtown lowdown and the work in progress dinner meetups and the downtown podcast and so on. By the way, the downtown podcast is undervalued. No matter what you think of it, it should be, it was good, but it was actually a critical resource for reaching out to people so they had some sense of what was happening in the downtown project. That is one of the things that is a dramatic failing in today's greater Vegas startup scene, is that nobody has any idea truly what's happening, and attempts at shining some light on some things are usually so understated that they're barely on the map, they're barely on the radar. So that as a fundamental for any sort of future-looking entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem growth and flourish, people should be able to figure out what's going on here. They should be able to discover it, and it should be exposed to them. And I mean that in the most marketing-friendly sense. Like if you come to Vegas, you should say, "Oh, I hear they have a this or that." And I can try it. Oh, they're in the hotel rooms. Oh, they're on the strip at this one place. Oh, I can visit over here and I can check that out. The latest in health and wellness, the latest in entertainment, whatever. So to provide access to those things for people visiting here is like low-hanging fruit. And being able to discover those things using normal media tools hey, we have a tremendous population of Instagram influencers, but that's an algorithm. And plus, Instagram is going to go nuts now with the Meta changing all of its stuff. So my point is this: if this is going to be a strong innovation ecosystem, a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem, and I would prefer them together, may I have both, half of each? An entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem needs several things. I think if we hang everything on a meetup on a Saturday every month and a few people that are known by their first names, you end up with the discussions that I've been having, which is, I'm not impressed. And we get a lot of hype without a lot of useful outcomes. And that's where the who of the story might, that'll get sorted out over the next near term. But I think the second story for what we are in now, as told sometime in the future, maybe 5 years from now, will look at what we could have done better and what we could have done differently. And I would like to start those things now. And that's where Initiative 2025 is. That's where the things I've been talking about through all these episodes are. And that's where, if you are an entrepreneur in the local, the Vegas scene, in the greater Vegas area, you hopefully are asking yourself, and I don't mean somebody who just shows up at events and checks the checkbox. I mean, you're working on something legitimately. You're a student and you want to pursue this path into entrepreneurialism. And I'll tell you this, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, when I spoke to students who were going to graduate, none of them were talking about staying here and working on things. They were talking about moving to Silicon Valley, moving to Denver, moving to Austin. And so someone said, I'm going to stay here in Vegas. And I said, oh, that's good. And he said, yeah, I'm not good enough to move to the Silicon Valley or something. Wow, that's harsh. So these are the sorts of things we should be keeping an eye on: our education infrastructure, our mentoring programs, our cultural development and cultivation in the innovation space, celebrating achievement, highlighting innovation and invention so that people who come here or people who are already here have any idea. Our news media is good at covering crime and politics, but not necessarily invention and success. That should change, and we can. Change amongst entrepreneurs comes from those entrepreneurs. If you ask an entrepreneur, is everything okay? Oh, I wish somebody would fix this. Well, why don't you fix it? You're an entrepreneur. I'm too busy. Do you know people? Can you attach your name to it? Maybe send out an email, maybe make more of a fuss. Try to invite people to participate in things. If entrepreneurs can do more than complain. It's right there in the name, entrepreneur, right? So that's what we're looking for. So the Genius Roundtable and so on will be the beginnings of that. I'm sure there will be some more episodes about all of this. Anyway, this episode was mostly me riffing. I only had very few notes written down this time. So let's enable and encourage innovation, entrepreneurialism, a little bit of both. And it's time to shake things up. And that's where it is. Bottom up, top down doesn't really work. I think we're going to start seeing that over and over again. Watch the baseball stadium project as an indicator. What happens when you let other people make decisions about huge money and impactful changes to traffic and access and so on? Or you can just look at Formula One. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. I got to go. But before I do be sure and listen in for the next few weeks while we detail some more of the Initiative 2025. Did I say Initiative 2025 earlier? I may have said Innovate 20. We should be innovating at 2025 also. But we'll try to cover more of this stuff. And I'm really going to start pushing for guests, especially if we can put together the Genius Roundtable version 2 sometime this month, January. Get that rolling in February. So hopefully I have a few guests there. These are all things that should be discussed openly so that many people can participate rather than having decisions made from the top from a few people. Let's make the second story about our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem of the greater Vegas area over the next 5 to 10 years. Let's make that second story interesting. The what and the who can both be okay. All right, on that note, really, I'm going to go this time. Take care. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.